Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is a hybrid athlete, fitness instructor, owner of Get Psyched Fitness, and author of the nonfiction book, Your Mindset is Your Reality. His name is John Borden, and my interview with John will follow the note-taking sounds. John Borden, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Appreciate you, Aaron. Good to talk to you, my man.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
So my name's John Borden. I live in St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm a personal trainer, mental health coach, and author, public speaker, and an athlete. I do kind of crazy things like strongman competitions, ultra marathons, obstacle course races like Spartan races, and really just try to challenge myself in any way that I can.
Your company is called Get Psyched Fitness, which is based in St. Petersburg, Florida. What is Get Psyched Fitness and what services does your company provide?
Yeah, so Get Psyched Fitness is really just a fitness company. Now, I am a personal trainer. I host group fitness classes. And we have a blend of mental and physical that goes along with everything that we do. So, for example, the group fitness class that I host on Sunday mornings, I call the Sunday Summit. What we do is we start with a reading from the Daily Stoic for that day. So it's ancient Stoic philosophers. Each have different quotes within this book, and we read from them, dissect them, and see how we can apply that to our daily life. And then we get into a really hard-hitting workout that's designed to kick my own ass. So if I'm kicking my own ass, I know that it's going to be a tough challenge for the people who are coming to my classes. So, it's all focused on bringing out the highest version of the people that come to Get Psyched Fitness mentally and physically.
Without spoiling too much about your nonfiction book, which is titled Your Mindset is Your Reality, what is your book about?
Yeah, it's a personal memoir. So it tells the story of my life, how I reached rock bottom about 3 years ago, and how I crawled myself out of that position to create a life that I'm proud of. The book covers my story with addiction and an experience that I had with psilocybin mushrooms that allowed me to see exactly what was limiting me in my life and how I could choose to live a more fulfilling, connected life.
Before you started using psychedelic mushrooms, you were, as you described yourself in the blurb of your book, which is the only part of the book I've seen is the cover and the blurb, but you described yourself in the blurb as a high-functioning addict. What does it mean to have been a high-functioning addict, and how did that negatively affect your life?
Yeah, so what that really comes down to is the fact that nobody else really labeled me in need of help because I was still able to do everything that I needed to do in life. I would still show up for work. I didn't miss a day of work because of any of my problems, regardless of if I was up until 4 a.m. the night before. I was always, up in time to make it and do my duties and excel at my job and everything like that. I would, I would drink at home and do coke alone by myself, but the most part, it was out with friends, and it was something that, was kind of masked because it was being done in a social situation. And so other people wouldn't have, labeled me as someone who, definitely needed rehab or anything like that. But my habits were creating a constant cycle of me living an unfulfilling life and essentially just waiting for the next big dopamine hit, whether that was from, alcohol or drugs, or that's from a sexual partner or, social media or whatever it was, that I was just, living for immediate gratification and not thinking of what I could be doing right now in each moment to make myself and my life better for the future.
What are psychedelic mushrooms and how did they help you overcome addiction?
Yeah. So do you have a history with psychedelic mushrooms, Aaron?
No, I've never used them.
Okay. So psilocybin is the active chemical in what's commonly referred to as magic mushrooms. And they were discovered in Guadalajara, Mexico in the 1950s by a JP Morgan banker, who then wrote an article for Time magazine and basically brought it to the Western world. Now, psychedelic mushrooms grow all around us, and so they're something that have existed alongside human beings for thousands and thousands of years. But we're really just starting to understand the potential of them. For a while, the US government got scared of what it did to allow people to think through their actions and think through how what we did affected others. And so that created, the anti-war movement of the 1970s because people were recognizing, hey, wait a second, why are we going over to a foreign land to kill people that we don't know for a cause that we don't believe in? And so the US government got scared of it and basically made all psychedelics illegal based off fear of what it would do to awaken people to the truth that we were fighting a war that was, not right. Uh, Fast forward to the 21st century, and these things have been restarted uh, to be researched again for their efficacy in mental health conditions, and they've been approved as a breakthrough therapy for depression, anxiety, addiction. They've shown promise for Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, eating disorders, essentially anything that you can think might have a positive impact in terms of mental health. Psilocybin mushrooms have shown to have potential to help people in a major way. And, essentially what it does and how it helps from from a mental health standpoint is it allows you to take a step back from yourself and disconnect yourself from your actions. There's a piece of all of us that we call the ego that, it exists to protect us and exists to tell ourselves a consistent story about who we are in the world and why things have happened to us in our life. And what psilocybin mushrooms do is kind of break down that ego and allow you to look at yourself without the pretense that you've created your whole life. And when you're able to do that, and you're able to take a step away and evaluate what's going on in your life and what you've done for yourself or what others have done to or for you, you're able to see things a lot more clearly and get a much more accurate picture of the things that have happened in your life than the one that you've been constructing yourself to stay safe.
Now, I do not hold this misconception about you, but some people may have a misconception about you that you traded alcohol, cocaine, and other addictions you had for another addiction. Why is that not true? And why are you not addicted to psychedelic mushrooms?
Well, I mean, plain and simple, I wasn't running ultra marathons or doing strongman competitions when I was drinking and using Coke, right? The key difference is that when you do that stuff, you're blocking yourself from yourself, right? It's a way to numb, it's a way to close out emotions or close out the things in your life that you need to see. When you do psychedelics, it's not closing off in the way that alcohol or cocaine uh, does to you. It essentially it's not really a fun experience, really. It forces you to look at yourself and it forces you to be honest with what you see. And so they're tools to be used for personal growth, and it's not used in the same way that alcohol or cocaine would. And so, I'm over 2.5 years free from cocaine, and I passed the 500-day mark of alcohol a week and a half ago. And what those things would do to me is absolutely wreck me for days to come. Uh, when I do psychedelics nowadays, it's typically not in a party setting. It's typically by myself with some time to think and reflect, and I come out a more clear-headed, determined person on the other side of it. So, it's a if somebody were to label the two as a trading for the other, it would really be a misconception on exactly what one tries to achieve when involved in either one of those two substances or two lifestyles. So I invite somebody to try both of those ways of living and get back to me.
What motivated you to write a nonfiction book?
Man, when you have an experience like I had and you go through the type of life transformation that I went through, there needs to be some type of documentation because I just could not believe how different my life was from, the middle of October when I started to use psilocybin for the first time and then the middle of November when I started to write my book. You know, it goes, as surface level as the alcohol and the cocaine, and as deep as healing the relationships that I had with my brother and my mother and my father and a number of other people in my life. And so, when you see the beautiful influence of these things and how it helped me, how it helped myself not only break free of those, addictions, it also helped me become a better person and appreciate the people in my life more completely. You recognize something is really special about these, and it goes deeper than the clinical trials that uh, had been in the news up until that point. Up until that point where I started writing my book, you'd hear stories about, cancer patients overcoming the fear of death or people with OCD not needing to live with OCD anymore. But the experience that I lived just goes to show how it's so much deeper than those extreme conditions, and that there's something to be gained for anybody who's willing to look at themselves. And so I really just wanted to show people that there's an inner strength within themselves that they could have potentially been locking away for years and years and years, like I have, and to give people the confidence and the curiosity to want to explore that for themselves.
How long did it take you to write your memoir?
Um, so I started writing in November of 2022. I published the book in July of 2024, and so we've got about 20 months in that time frame. But like let's say 2 months of it was editing it prior to getting it ready for print, so about a year and a half.
What are the easiest and hardest aspects of writing a memoir for you?
Um, so the hardest I would say is really just finding the time to do it. Uh, it it takes a lot of dedication to want to devote your time and effort to something like that. We're talking about, you know, days when, you'd work all day and then you'd open up the laptop and type for a couple hours. You'd be talking about Saturdays and Sundays where you're giving up the weekend to sit in front of the laptop and type and type and type and type. And, it's just a really long process. But when you've determined what your goal is and when you've determined how you want to live your life, those sacrifices no longer seem as daunting. And so, while that was the hardest part, having that guiding North Star of wanting to do this to make an impact for other people and see who else's life might be made better by me sharing my story, was the perfect motivation that I needed to keep getting it done. Um, and you asked about the easiest part of it as well, or what was the second part of that
Yeah,
question?
the easiest aspect of writing a memoir for you.
Yeah, talking about myself, I think has always been easy. I've been, I've never written anything official before. When I was in college, I had a paper that one of my professors wanted to turn into a scholarly article, but that fell through before we were able to get that completed. Um, I'd always been somebody that scored highly on essays and papers and everything like that. So I felt confident in my writing. Um, and just it's an art form, being able to put down exactly what you're thinking, exactly what you're feeling onto paper and allow other people to resonate with it. And so I'm just very grateful that I had the schooling that I had, the influence that I had in my life to be able to bring that to people.
Is your nonfiction book independently, traditionally, or hybrid published?
I published it myself through Amazon.
Okay, through a Kindle Direct Publishing.
That's correct.
Yes, okay. Uh, what is your best advice? Because you're a first-time memoir author yourself. What's your best advice for people who have never written a book before, but they want to write a memoir?
That's a great question. I would say begin with the end in mind. Understand what type of message that you're trying to send to the people who are picking up your book, and dial it back from there. Find the stories, find the examples that fit into the type of impact that you're trying to make for the reader. Start with start with the end, and then you know hammer that storyline until you can figure out how to connect all the dots and make it make sense for people.
I have one final question, and this pivots back to your work for Get Psyched Fitness and your work as an athlete as well. What do you love most about being a hybrid athlete and a personal trainer?
I'll answer that in two parts. Firstly, the thing that I love most about being a personal trainer is seeing the excitement on the faces of the people that I work with when they see how far they've grown. For example, I had one client who I've been working with for a few months now and just achieved his first 315 pound deadlift. And to be able to celebrate with him when he got that up for the first time was just an awesome time where we're screaming and yelling and high-fiving and hugging. And it's just a really exciting teamwork type feel moment. And then I have another client who's lost 50 pounds, and just seeing, the smile on her face and the change in her energy and the way that her kids have started to adapt to her own changes and, lose weight and become more athletic their own. And so, just seeing my influence uh, permeate through the people that I work with is fucking beautiful. And the thing that I love most about being a hybrid athlete is that I'm in a few different circles, because I do the obstacle course races, I do distance running, and I do strongman. I'm consistently pushing myself to the limit in three different disciplines, whether that's endurance, strength, or speed. And to be able to compete at a high level in all three, uh, it really just makes me feel like the freak that I am. And I love conversing with other people who are in those fields, talking about what I do because it makes me understand how much of an outlier I am.
John, you were a wonderful guest to interview, and I thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
I appreciate your time, Aaron. Thank you very much. I love the questions, my man.
John was a fascinating and interesting guest to interview. For Kindle Unlimited subscribers, the Kindle ebook version of Your Mindset is Your Reality is available through Kindle Unlimited. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2025, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.